I spend my life researching and teaching people how to live a powerful life. I am a believer. I stand for the transformation of humanity. I have found my purpose. My name is Gabrielle McGee, and I am the Rebellious Therapist. And welcome to the Rebellious Therapist podcast. And my guest today is a gentleman who I've been watching and looking at his career over the last few years. His name is Ruairí Stewart. Now, let me just give you a little bit of what Ruairí does. So Ruairí is also, like me, a psychotherapist. He does also do transformational coaching, but specialize in complex trauma. Now, it's my delight today to have this conversation with Ruairí, because it's like we can go on to a level where, you know, we know our way around human behavior. So I hope this is going to be of great value, which I know it will be. And yeah, so welcome, Ruairí. Welcome to my podcast.
Looking forward to being here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know if I give you a good enough explanation of your background, where you work, how you work. So I think we'll start there, Ruairí, just to give people a little bit of more in-depth of who you are, right? So,
definitely. So I suppose getting onto I'll explain how it works. So basically, the bulk of the people that I would serve in the online space would be, I'm mainly working with relationships. I'm mainly working with people that have had really negative, disempowered experiences in relationships. They might have had relational trauma. They might have been through abusive dynamics. They might have felt like they've lost their sense of self. There's no concept of personal power. They're maybe lacking confidence or trust in themselves. And then at the other extreme, I'm meeting people that have had really flat experiences of therapy where it just hasn't gelled. And they want an approach. And I think what's been good about social media and being on podcasts and talking is that people can kind of get a sense for your energy and your approach. So that's kind of how I find the people that I inevitably then work with. So a bit about my own background. I think, like, if I'm totally honest and transparent with myself, I've found myself in counselling and in psychotherapy probably because I needed it when I was younger, like most people. I initially started out going into psychology when I'd done my undergrad, thinking that it was represented kind of like what I believe psychotherapy was, but it wasn't. It's very, very different in its own way. Eventually found myself going through like CBT, all the kind of traditional ways of learning in the beginning, and it wasn't really resonating with me as a person. Took some time off. Then I found myself doing a bit of personal training, getting to know clients, and then I found like a lot of the relationships that even in that space where I was working like with the physical body, people were opening up about their relationships and talking. So I don't know, I always just found myself being pulled back into that serving role. And then around 2016, then 2017, I found my way into systemic transformational family therapy. And that just clicked a massive switch with me. It was very well timed, helped me unpack a lot of my stuff. And then just since then, I've just been very, very obsessively growing and learning and just trying to see where everything clicks and learns. And I've went through the somatic work and hypnotherapy and hypnoanalysis, and I've just been constantly trying to see where can I apply this with people that are coming on that maybe need a different approach. And it's just like maybe developing a load of different keys that can turn the lock for somebody. But I don't know if I answered your question.
I've just
been very, very connected.
Very good. What's really interesting when I hear your sort of professional journey, it's very similar to mine. No, I started off, I ran into therapy because I had a breakdown.
100%.
So, and I'm going to tell you a funny story. The first day or the first session I had with the therapist, I think first or second, I can't even remember, so long ago, I looked over, she'd fallen asleep. I'm like, oh my God. And you know, it's like your first ever session with a therapist and you look over. I actually had a really great sense of humor because I laughed my whole way out of there. I mean, like, even though I was in a lot of pain, but actually I thought that is just the maddest thing I have ever seen.
Crazy. And I think like when you, especially, I don't know, maybe if you work in that space, but you hear some absolutely horrendous stories of like things people have been told. And it's like, I remember being in a scenario one time where I had to share something in my own personal therapy, and like I don't really want it. The person just burst into tears, and I was kind of like, "What am I supposed to do? Like, what are you crying for?" And I'm like, and you don't really. I think part of it is recognizing if you have like a really bad experience or maybe a bit of a flat experience that you don't write off the actual possibility for change with somebody else, because you can go on and somebody might say the wrong thing or they might not be able to on the rapport with you or attune with you or maybe fully appreciate or understand the journey that you've been on. But that doesn't mean that there's not a facilitator out there that will. And I think that's a really good point. Like, because for me, I think we were talking about it there earlier beforehand. Like, because of that experience, I was able to take that out and then unpack it and look at it and learn from it. And I think even on a personal level, having been exposed to that, I have more appreciation now for people that are coming in and sharing big stuff and knowing how to hold that and contain that and ground that.
Well, yeah, you know what? It was really interesting because that also that experience for me led me to go and look for a different way of therapy. So, and then I found the a place called Spectrum. Spectrum. It's it's a Gestalt and humanistic approach, and an integrative. So they were doing all of what suited me. So it was a really fantastic opportunity for me to experience the therapy, work with me first, and then I started training with the organization.
That's that layer.
So, but I think that's what's really interesting about life. Life is taking you a certain way, and you might think it needs to look this way, but actually, we don't have much say in where we're going.
For sure.
We're guided,
even like within the approaches that you'll be drawn to, I think even for people starting out, maybe even in their therapeutic career, thinking like, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this. As you evolve and grow as a person, your approach is going to evolve and grow. Different methods and models will resonate because of your element of personality and what you bring into that space as a person. And I think the systemic family therapy for me was such a light bulb because I could see it and I could tangibly relate to things that was going on in my life. And then when I was listening to people, it just gave me a more flexible way of seeing things. Whereas if I just had that really rigid dogmatic approach of this is the only way that I work, I would never have been able to expand and kind of grow from that.
Perfect. It's a perfect example, but also it's like there's some level of intelligence within you that you knew you wanted more. Do you understand? I know I want more. One of the things that the name of my podcast is The Rebellious Therapist. And why I say that is because I refuse, I've been, 30 years I've been training, right? And those 30 years, every sort of part of my training, they would say, this is it. This is the real training. They'd nearly rubbish everything else, but I would never accept
arrogance.
that.
There's an arrogance.
It's like there's a lot of the political stuff goes on, and believe it or not, in being in this sort of like career that we've chosen, like being in this profession. But I'd always ignore it, and that was the rebel in me, and I kept searching for, it's really interesting. I done psychology first. Then I went and done psychotherapy, same as you. And then, I worked in an international coaching body worldwide called Landmark Education for 5 or 6 years. And then I was really, really frustrated at some point thinking, you know what? I'm getting to a certain level. And, I did all the somatic work right through. But the icing on the cake for me is whenever I trained as a hypnotherapist. Between the hypnotherapy work and the body somatic work, when you put that together, it is
the whole spectrum. Well, not the whole spectrum. I think like what it gives you is access to layers and levels of being able to create change and integration that you can't do with a standard approach. And I think what's really unique, even when you think about like, your journey through those different stages of learning, is that it's about forging your own path, and it's like being mercurial. It's like, right, I'm not afraid to try and integrate these things or see if I can find my own way of implementing them without trying to stay within that confined framework. And that's your use of self as a personality too. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm delighted that you've sort of chosen all the different, processes And how long have you been, like, you're a young man, How long have you?
What's what I say? I think like only for certain experiences in my life, I kind of always because I struggled with my mental health off and on over the years with depression and stuff. And then very early in my career, when I was working with somebody, I worked with somebody that eventually took their life, and that took a lot out of me. It happened after I'd finished working with this person, and it just took me a long time to recover from that. And I think it just kind of renewed this sense of like when I think of work and I think of like it is a privilege to be able to do the work in that space, and I think it needs to be given that respect. So for me, it's not about how many clients can I get, how much money can I make, how much change can I implement. It's about recognizing for me, like I'm witnessing some of the fucking most vulnerable parts of a human being, and I don't like taking people on unless I know I'm going to be able to facilitate something
Make a
impactful for
difference.
them. I don't want part of my life to be just clock hours and just do a bit of work. I want it to actually have meaning, and I think I'm very very fortunate in the way that some of the people that have come to me, it's always felt very synchronistic because I don't know how I would come across these people. It's nearly like I don't know, maybe that sounds a bit cliched, but I find people from all over, and I know that as soon as I speak to them, I'm like I'm definitely going to be able to help this person.
Yeah, but also, do you not think so? Because you've taken such a, you know, like, like you can come on so many levels and so many angles and so many processes, and you can, your experience and where you've trained from gives you so much ability to deal with the process that the person in front of you need. It's probably more, I would say you're not giving yourself enough credit, right? Because it's more of where you work from that you reach people rather than them just both. I believe in both, right? I believe people show up that matches where you work, the energy of that. I believe in that, right?
Yeah,
But
definitely.
also, it's also give yourself, you know, well, I'm hearing and I'm understanding where you're working from. So I know I'd be really confident to know that you will make a difference with any human that's in front of you.
I think like what I tend to lose sight of, and I've had that, in supervision before, where it's not like I think where I lose sight of it, it's like I know it's not about not that it is ever about me in that process, but it's where I have to catch that. It's like you're not a rescuer either. You're facilitating a process of change for that person, and it's not about holding myself that standard where if that doesn't happen, that I then cripple myself for that expectation. And I think that especially in my younger years, drove a lot of the education because it's like I want to have as many tools in the box for the person that comes through so that they're not disheartened and they're not left stuck and they're not left dysregulated, that I've got this ability here to do the best that I can. Do you know what I mean?
Beautiful, beautiful, Roy. So I want to say, can you talk to me about how you work with relationships and actually what I wanted to really talk about is there's a really the new age relationship, the new way of dating, the new sort of Tinder stuff that's going on. What's your take on that, and what do you see of benefits? There's so many benefits because
Benefit. I think of benefit. I don't know. I think I'm not like right. I want to think about what way I'm going to phrase
yeah,
this. I
I know
think it.
that's a lot of questions I give you. So think about
It's
it.
more because my mind's jumping to three or four different
Mm,
things. I think like if I was looking at it on paper, the benefit is that there's a lot of apps that can facilitate, create an opportunity to meet people. I think where the negative is the illusion of quantity and the illusion of quality. And I think you're meeting people at various stages and seasons in their life. And I think the biggest pitfall that I've seen is people masquerading as wanting something because they're getting their needs met, maybe physically or even emotionally at the cost of somebody else. And I think it's also a massive drain on people's mental and emotional energy because they spend so much time on an app as opposed to in real life engaging with people. I think it's as much as it should be a tool for connection, I think it creates a lot of disconnection. I think it's creating a lot of confidence issues. And I think it's also creating just this culture of disregarding other people. And I think once we have that illusion of quantity as well, it's like, well, I don't really need to invest because there's this, and this matches out there. And I think like if that wasn't there and we had to strike up conversations with people and we had to put effort on it and form that connection in real life, I think there's a substantial benefit to doing that.
yeah, do you know what? when you talk, it just reminds me. I think if you had both, I think they have to learn how to connect. They don't know before they even get on Tinder. They have no way of connection or not
Uh,
practice or not, especially the younger generation. Like I only heard terms when I started looking at Love Island where you're not my
I don't even
girlfriend
watch
yet.
it. I just think
I watch it all the time.
I
Oh,
was speaking with somebody. I don't want to give away information, but they were basically connected to a really big TV show that's similar to that, and they were
mm,
talking about the recruitment process and how they were screening the people for it. And I was like, that we're showing elements of the most toxic aspects of how people are. This is going to be a template for how people
yeah.
think they're going to behave.
Mm,
And I think like it's also just, I'm not saying cheapening, it's creating this idea that relationships then become transactional. They give us something as opposed to like creating fulfillment for us. Because the way I kind of look at a relationship, it's like I'm choosing to be with this person. I want to share aspects of my life and self with this person. And if I think about if that's not true for everybody, but if I think like if I want to have a family and have a long-term vision with this person, I need to be clear on who I am, what I want, what I don't want, and also what kind of person does our values align? How do they treat me? How do I feel with them? Can I trust them? And I think if all I'm seeing is just all this other circus behavior going on online, or especially in social media, people being like just putting up really triggering, disempowering information on TikToks or Instagram and Reels. And it's like, none of that's actually conducive to you getting what you want from a
yeah.
relationship
Very good.
because it's sound bites. It's just
Yes.
sound bites. It's none of that's actually based on
Mm.
anything that will actually get you what you want, because those things don't come easy, because we need vulnerability. We need authenticity. We need self-trust and confidence. We need to learn to use our voice. We need to have personal standards and respect for ourselves, but also respect for the other person and an appreciation of who they are and what they bring to the table, instead of just like,
So, Roy, can I ask you a question? That's really articulated and really clear because you've done so much work on yourself, right? So, my take on it is I think it's really useful because you have it's the plus and the minus. So the apps are useful if you know how to navigate yourself in there and to be really clear on who you're looking for and what you're looking for. I think they're of a great value, but I think the real downfall is people don't do enough personal work before they get on there, and they're looking for all their childhood needs from people in relationship, and it goes absolutely, as you know, the relationships that they're in, actually a lot of transference, projection, and
a lot of
fantasy,
stuff goes
and there's no
on. And I
connection.
think this is my biggest gripe with it, and I think it's
Mm,
primarily because I work nearly exclusively with women.
yeah.
I can't remember where I read that statistic before. It was something like 40% of the people that are using apps are using it portraying themselves to be wanting something that they don't actually want. That's my gripe with it. So if I'm in that space and I have a nefarious agenda and I'm like, I'm going to tell this woman what she thinks she wants to hear at the cost of her for me to get my needs met, how much, how much personal development and space is going to offset that? I've seen scenarios where people very well intentioned, they've had boundaries, they've communicated their needs, they've met up with this person, they've taken it a slow pace, boom, ghosted, or then they find out this person wasn't even who they were saying that they were. And I don't know that within that space, if we're talking about using it with intention, where we're going to be able to cut through that other side of things where people are using it to be exploitative. And I think, again, when you're meeting people at different seasons in life where they're just keeping in the experience for other people because they're using and disregarding them, it's very discouraging in that sense. And I think I do understand where you're coming from, where therapy can be helpful in building up ego strength and resilience. But when I look at it from like a solutions perspective, for me, if I get fucking sacked and I was like, right, fuck apps, I don't want to have to go down this road of being on an app all day and match with people. My thinking on that would be, I want to go meet somebody in real life. I'm going to try and get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to try and put myself in a space with people of similar values. I'm going to see if I can strike up a conversation with somebody and try and grow through that experience, because there's something there within that I feel there's an element of control with. Just perhaps I think like the problem is you can be left unread and just be left completely ghosted, or you might find out the person isn't even who they say they are. They might have a secret wife and kids, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this who are like, "Oh, that happened to me. I found out he had a girlfriend, or I found out she was," and that is the major disheartening thing about it. You can have all that growth and all that personal development, know all your boundaries and expectations and deal breakers, and then you've got a wolf in sheep's clothing at the other end of the phone.
Very good. So So where do you, advise people to go and look? Like I say, people don't be going to the bar to look for your husband.
Well, again, that's the
Where do they
values.
go?
You
Yeah.
don't want to be going with somebody that's a drinker,
Mm.
seeking them out in that environment.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, I met this person on a house party and he was off his head in drugs, and then started dating them. And what do they do at the weekend? They go to the weekend, they're off their head in drugs. And where's that fit in your life? It doesn't. It's like, right, well, you kind of have to look at the origin of where you met the person. Like, you've seen them for who they were in that scenario. So, like, it's, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's definitely not easy to get out of your comfort zone, but that concept in my mind of being in spaces where people have similar values, for some people it could be like going to like yoga studios, it could be going to meditation classes, it could be going to something that resonates with them as a human being, that puts them in a community of people that have like-minded values, and trying to form connections in that way. But obviously there's time constraints within that. If you feel, you have to look after kids, or you're juggling jobs or other responsibilities, but it's looking at what's possible within the scope of, your schedule and your life, but trying to stay true to who you are and your values, and not trying to mold yourself into somebody that you're not.
Yeah.
There's no point going out to a pub and out to a club every week if that's not really what you want.
Mm-hmm. So, Rory, I think I just want to address something and see what your sort of views on it, right? I watch, now don't get me wrong, I love social media. Like, social media has changed how I work, and has changed the type of people I work. And I actually have a lot of respect. I don't see social media a lot of times how people do see it, but I do know that social media does have comes with its own sort of issues.
Mm.
And I see a lot of the young people growing up now, and there's a lot of how sort of like examples that we didn't have in our day, how to live your life and how you need to look, and there's extreme pressure and examples of how they need to be living their life, not even looking, but they actually have to have this extreme lifestyle. And it's a really interesting place. And I'm wondering, in the next, first of all, I know there's lots of questions in here, so I apologize about this, but I just want to know from your end, how do you see, that show up in people's lives? And what do you think we're going to be working with in the future because of it as therapists?
That's a really good question. I think as a vehicle, like, it's got its pros and cons as anything. It can facilitate, it should, in theory, facilitate connection with people over the globe. And I think in many ways it does allow for that. But I think one of the big problems is it also disconnects us from a lot of human experiences. If you think about how much time, that's a very common complaint in relationships. It's like, my partner's always on their phone, or we come up from work, greet each other, we sit down and we're eating our dinner, and both people are on their phone, or their kids are on their phone. And like, if we even just think about the amount of dopamine that the brain's getting access to, and that constant novel stimulation, we're not developing the resources to be able to sit in our own space and actually just attend to the self, and actually just be in that and explore from ourselves what's going on. I think, like, to your point there about problems that can come with that, specifically in the mental health space, I'll say, within social media, part of the problem is that there's like this ever expanding diagnostic criteria that's being put up and misrepresented. People are starting to self-diagnose or using language and terminology that's actually taken away from the severity of what they're describing. And, I think that is problematic in itself, because people are getting overexposed to concepts and terms without nuance and without context. And it's creating identities that aren't really serving people. And I think, like, there's loads of ways you can look at it. If you are seeing people talking about, certain expectations or things that you should or shouldn't settle for in a relationship, or signs of X, Y, and Z, it's sound bites. It's to create engagement. It's to create content. It's to create, a movement around a certain topic, but that may not actually be useful, may not actually be practical. And it's also could be taken out of context. And I think one of the big problems that I see within that is that, again, when you were saying there about people comparing themselves, or people thinking about, like, how should they be living, you're not actually coming back to the self. And I think the big problem with social media as a whole is that it creates this constant comparison, and comparison to that level, to me, cripples your confidence.
Yeah.
And it cripples your sense of self, and you will never find a sense of direction and purpose if you're constantly looking in the rear mirror at whoever else and whatever else is going on, because that's not your circus for a start. Again, you have no tangible reference as to what's going on behind closed doors. And that's the big thing that I see in the therapeutic space. I can meet people that are hyper confident. They might look phenomenal. They might appear like they've got their shit together. And behind closed doors, it's all falling apart. And you marry up the streets comparing herself to that photo, or comparing like her life
or
to
what they think exactly, or what they think that life looks like.
Exactly. And the other part of that is, for all you know, that person could swap away Mary in a heartbeat. You know, if their problems were all laid out on the table, you might actually take your problems back. You might look at that and go, "Fucking, I wouldn't swap with that." Like, but you know, the constant comparison, and I think when we look at it from a place of harassment and bullying, that's where social media is really toxic. It's non-stop and relentless. And I think even when we look at, you know, some of the statistics that's coming on about people being trolled, you know, and this is one of the things that people aren't really talking about. It's a lot of women that are involved in trolling other women.
Very good.
And that's a statistic that they don't want to talk about.
They don't want to know.
Misogynistic remarks, you know, demeaning remarks about reputation and character, and non-stop harassment is coming primarily from females to females in the digital space. And I think, like, for young girls especially, there's a sense of powerlessness within that, because, you know, the whole relationship with the self is the way that that's going to heal. But, you know, young people want to be a part of that community online. They want to be seen with their peers. They want to have the normal rites of passage. But there's also nothing normal about social media.
No.
Have somebody having access to, you know, you're getting bullied at school, and somebody can message you at 9 o'clock at night when you're sitting in the house.
Yes.
You know, that's the thing I don't like about it.
Yeah.
And I could go on. I could genuinely spend a lot of time talking about that. And I also think the solution to it's very simple for parents. If you've got young teenage children, I know it's not realistic, but don't let them have social media. You know, see the improvement in their mental health. Like, I only had, you probably remember, like, Nokia's when Nokia's came out.
Yeah. We didn't have, do you know, I was laughing to myself. I didn't have a phone whenever I was in London starting to train. They'd come in later. And I'm like, oh my God, now it's so advanced.
I couldn't imagine having to go back through school and with social media. I couldn't. I genuinely couldn't. And I don't envy the generation that had to grow up with it. But I think, again, if we look at it in terms of the prevalence of mental health issues, they've skyrocketed. It hasn't increased. If anything, it's increased.
It's increased. And thank God the awareness has increased. But it has increased as well because of this, you know, the disconnect and everything. It's the pressure. And you see, what the issue for me is, even though they might be aware, but there's a lot of unconscious programming going on while they're in that sort of process of scrolling. That's all unconscious behavior.
And the mechanics of it, like, you know, when you run your finger across the feed, it's the same as a slot machine.
Yeah, same thing.
It's the addictive. It's the dopamine reward system. So, you know, when you look at the platform for what it is, they're able to monetize your attention. So again, when we're talking about connection and disconnection, whether from the self or from the partner, you know, for some people, the device is what's crippling the relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, you might even talk about, for young people, your mental health has got so bad, and yet you're not in real life, you know, building the confidence up. You're not in nature. There's so many things that could actually be improved if you were unplugged from that system.
Yeah, completely. No, totally.
You're not exposed to that stuff. Like, if we think about it on a micro level, if you're not in a small town caught up in gossip, you're not exposed to it, so you're not drained by it. But if you're online trolling through people's stuff, how are you going to feel? Of course, you're ingesting all that negativity.
There's the negativity. Exactly, you know. No. So, excellent. I want to talk to you now about more in your personal life. About, you know, I hear you're going to compete now. Is it usually next week? And I know.
So I'm going to Tenerife for a few days just to do preparations for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition now in Portugal. So I'm competing in the Lisbon Open, and then I've just done the London Open in August, and now I'm doing Lisbon, and then I'm doing London again, and then potentially Rome in November.
So Roy, talk me through, you know, the process, what that process is for you, because there's a lot involved in being at the competing stages of any sport. But why this sport?
Why this? Oh, that's a good one. I mean, like, for me, what I know of my own process, sports was always a distraction for me, especially when, like, my mental health wouldn't have been good, but it was also
very good.
for suppose a sense of self, a sense of achievement, a sense of
Mm.
merit. But for me, I think I really value the community element of it. I value like having not like a fraternity. I like having a community of people around me that I can see pushing me, and I feel like I've got accountability and discipline there, and I have to show up. I have to be. It's just in my personality to be the best that I can be. I don't need to be the very best, but I'll try and be the best that I can be. And I am very competitive. And I think I put off competing BJJ for so long because every sport I've ever done, whether it was boxing, kickboxing, bodybuilding, I've had to try and go to the very top. And with this, it was way out of my comfort zone. And it's a very addictive sport in that it's always changing. It's very dynamic. Um, and I just love it. Like my entire network in London has been built around it. Many people, so many friends. I've had so many experiences, and I think for anybody that has ever done that sport, there's once you're on the mat, basically, there's no other identities at play. There's no politics, there's no religion, there's no I don't care what job you do. You know, a friend of mine was talking about one time he was teaching a guy and he didn't realize that it was a sheik from another country. And
Yes.
it's like, you know,
Yeah.
there is no, you know, we're all the same when we're in that environment. And I think just for me, it's been a really good vehicle for growth. You know, when I lock that in and I set the goal, and I say this to people, you know, sometimes when they're feeling a bit lost and hopeless or they've come out of a breakup, I'm like, right, what we're going to do is we're going to grieve, we're going to attend to self, but we're going to have a future facing goal. We're going to have direction and purpose and something even in the short term that we can mobilize through this.
Very good. Very
As
good.
soon as I set that goal for myself, it's brought out some of the best of me then going forward.
Excellent. And one of the things I want to go back to what you mentioned was community. You know, you've chosen a community that works for you. It's huge. You know, I talk about this all the time. I run my retreats. You know, we have a part of the work I do called the Vi Tribe retreats, and it's all I talk a lot about community. But you choose your community that's going to support you. Listen, because they do over the weekend. We will hopefully at some point be involved together, or you'll come on my retreat to see the process. Can't wait to have you on. But we go from as mostly women. Now next week I'm going to do my first mixed one in Ireland. I've done mixed before, but the first mixed one in Ireland. But up until now in Ireland I've done all, it's mostly girls from 20 to around 33, 34. And that process, what the benefits of being in that process and then living your life from there is you got community. You're involved in a community, and a community that has done, as everyone's in the same process of working on their life, working on their stuff, and they have a real collective. I get people saying, they've got best friends, but they never had a connection like they've had over the weekend because it's authentic, it's real.
It's heart-led, it's soul-led, and it's also
all of it.
You've got that parallel of values, and there's also that feeling seen by somebody that's going through something similar. And that's like, you can't buy that. Like, that has come from you tuning into something that you know you need to do. And when you find yourself in them spaces with community, like, you can't really put a value on it because your whole life can change from that.
Totally. I see lives changing. I see people have traveled to Bali and all. And I remember looking at one of those pictures, and there was these girls were sitting around the like a coffee shop or something, and I was counting, oh my God, there was at least 6 to 7 of the what I call the Vibe Tribe community sitting around. So they've traveled together. They're all connected through the world together. And I'm like, oh my God, isn't that amazing? That is one of the benefits of, going through the process was one, is like the weekend is really interesting because, and I want to talk to you about this for a minute, right? One of the things that I have to teach women and young girls is how to express anger.
Of course. We could look at the conditioning around what contains it.
Right. So can you just talk to me about your thoughts about that?
Aye. Oh, how much time have you got?
Yeah, I know.
So for me, like with anger, like a lot of it, when I think about how this manifests, normally the way I would look at it is I like to go back into the family of origin. I like to look at the conditioning. I like to look at the survival strategy. How did that person get seen? What is the communication strategy that's at play here? has there ever been a healthy model of anger in the family of origin? Was there maybe exposure to over the top anger? Was that person ever shamed or demeaned for having emotions? And then I think that one of the major problems for females, especially, is the good girl complex, the murder, the selfless one.
Or the victim. The victim is a big one
as well. But then this is the thing about, secondary agendas as well, where sometimes being the victim gives you a certain quality of life or certain needs being met. And that has to be looked at too, because there's elements of the shadow play there. But I think when we're talking about anger, it's the big one that I see that comes up with there, especially with people pleasing, is that the anger is not going away. The anger is the red light in the car to say something is wrong. And it's like underneath that anger is a whole depth of emotion. You've got sadness, disappointment, frustration, hurt, all those other feelings that haven't been named, that haven't been addressed. And that anger is not going to go away. It's going to be that silent resentment. It's going to be that frustration. It's going to be that passive aggression that's there.
Can I just say to you as well, that thing you were talking about, on social media, there's a lot of girls attacking each other on social. That's because they're never, ever accessed their anger, and they're projecting and dumping.
It's socially condoned. It's socially condoned. And for some people, it's nearly performative and it's applauded. And where I see that the most, where it's really, really toxic, is in the social justice space, where people fucking annihilate people that they've never met. And it's nearly like they're trying to set dogs on people. It's like, I get after them, stop this person existing. And it's like, that's a human being. It's a human being at the other end of that screen. That person's lives are irreparably going to change as a result of this harassment.
Exactly. And Ruairí, that's all the unconscious behavior acting out and mirroring and projecting onto
aggression. If we look at the gender difference with aggression, it's like with men, there's always that threat. If I push this too far with another man, I could very, very seriously be injured.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we look at indirect communication with women, like sometimes when we go back to the family of origin, it may not have been safe for them to use their voice. It actually physically may not have been safe for them to say no. They may have been totally rejected from that system for having a need or having a voice. They might have been guilted or shamed. And the thing is, like, even in their interpersonal relationships, especially if they're struggling with codependency or people pleasing or other elements of that, there can be major barriers around guilt at even having needs or even speaking up. So it's not that the anger's not there or that the resentment's not there. It's the denial of self is so strong that they push this down that they're still somatically even carrying it. And they look at them because they put all that tension on their shoulders and on their neck. And, the thing is, feelings demand to be felt. At some point you will have to name that anger. And beneath that anger, there's going to be so much hurt. There's going to be so much sadness. There's going to be so much frustration and disappointment. But out the other side of that, if you can just utilize that anger in a healthy, constructive way and not judge yourself for having a human experience and learn to be assertive and not take ownership or responsibility for that other person's interpretation or response to your communication, then you can begin to change your life.
Yeah, very good. Because one of the conversations I've been having with the people I work with is, anger is an empowering tool. Once you know how to use it. So you're acting it out or you're avoiding. They're both in the same space. One looks more, obviously one's more violent. But if you bring yourself you've got to feel like I have to, our only way out is to feel the emotion, right? As and it's the only way to heal. Yeah.
And it's like what you're saying, it's either constructive or destructive.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that's brilliant that, that you've articulated that really beautifully,
Well, I think like the big one that I see, especially with women, is I don't want to be thought of as a bad person. I don't want to be called a bitch. I don't want to be called, and I'd be like, but I don't use that language with men.
Yeah.
So I get that it's other people that have installed this concept, but the way I look at it, I that's one thing I love and admire about my partner. She calls me out. She holds me.
Yeah, very good.
Pushes me to be better than who I can be. But at the same time, like, there's a lot of growth that has to happen for somebody to find their voice and find that sense of self. And I think, like, if there's a real fear, like, one of the things I see when I'm working in that space is, what is the barrier to you speaking up? And then we have to, and this is maybe where the therapeutic approaches might be different. We might come in and look at it, and I have in the therapy space, we might have to work on the unconscious. We might have to work with it. But I have to find out what has been the barrier to you speaking up. And then even if it was a somatic thing, internal safety, grounding the nervous system so that I can use my voice. So all those things, it's not just a case of oh, I've seen a post online, I should speak up and tell my partner and blah, 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 blah. Because there's nuance to that as the way a person can't.
Very
And
good.
I think that is something that's very overlooked and out of context online.
One of the process we do a process called anger. I do anger work. We take them through a certain amount of hours, process through stuff, and then there's a certain point during the weekend where we will get them all to express the anger, but we work with the nervous system.
Aye.
And I find it, it works wonders for anxiety because it's nearly like an antidote for the fear. So it was amazing to watch the people after we've done that part of the weekend, how everyone changes. And the weekend now that's coming up next week, I've actually got, because it's mixed, I'm bringing in a professional boxer, and I want to talk to you about this now, right?
Yeah.
So now we've got the men, and the man is more acceptable to express anger, where they're not allowed to cry, they're not allowed. We've conditioned men to be a certain way, to be tough, to be the provider. It's been going on for generations and generations. So now there's a new call out, which I find bizarre, that they want the men to show up as men, but also they want them now to be emotional. And one of the things I keep saying to them, men are emotional, but they don't know how to express this emotion. And they want them to express it the same way as their girlfriends do. But they're not your girlfriends.
I think, and I have to say this respectfully, I don't think people really know what the fuck they want.
Yeah.
And I think
like
they
that.
do. And I'm being really transparent with this because I've been in both those places where I've been really I don't think I've ever really been on my feminine for long, but I've been vulnerable. I've been in that place and I know how it made me feel. And I also know what I'm doing my masculine, what that's like on my partner. So when I think about it, even holding space for somebody and working in that way, I think we like the idea of a very strong, confident, self-assured man. And we would like the idea of that person to be able to come to us and hold space and open up and talk about those things. But I think if I'm being totally honest, I think men need that from other men. I don't think they need that from their partner. And I think the major reason for that is because when we look at the masculine and feminine polarity,
I love that.
It's that idea of if I come to my partner and I'm the provider and I'm the protector, and I'm not talking about gender roles before people start going off on a tangent.
Exactly.
If I'm trying to hold stuff down and I want to make sure my partner is taken care of so that she can surrender into the process and she can feel held and safe and she knows I've got my shit together, then I'm not willingly going to want to come to her and be like, right, I'm going through this thing or this stuff's coming up. But in that, I should have a space for that. And I think the major barrier for that with men has been, I don't want to feel weak or vulnerable. And I think if we look at that from an evolutionary or biological perspective, especially from competition,
Oh yeah.
Vulnerability was your point of weakness that could be exploited where you could be hurt or killed. So when we have strong, hard-led men that are grounded and secure in their sense of self, that can hold a space and go, look, I've been where you've been, and you can open up and talk. And it's not about we're having a fucking eat, pray, love moment, but it's I've got that accountability. I've got that emotional support. I've got people here trying to help me be better than what I can be. And then in turn, I can bring the best of me to that space with my partner.
Very good.
Rather than just pushing all this down or numbing it with distraction and work and bodybuilding and fucking messaging girls and doing all this other inappropriate stuff. If I can be totally honest and transparent with myself and I can show up in that space for other people and take responsibility for what's going wrong in my life, I can then come back into that space with her and I don't have to open that and put that on her.
Completely. Excellent. So it's all about responsibility.
Well, it all starts with us. It has to. I think absolutely. When I say I don't think people really know what they want, I think they like the concept of this modern civilized man.
I'm not sure that man exists. I think that's fantasy.
And I'm not saying to get into a debate with people. I think being emotionally intelligent is one thing. Yeah. I think being able to verbalize and communicate with your partner is oxygen to the relationship. But I also think that there's a time and place for a man to really be in his emotions and to go through certain things. And I think if that's too frequent and if a man's too in his feminine and she has to lead, there's resentment there.
Yeah, exactly.
That goes against the actual dynamic that needs to be in place. But again, there's so much that can be discussed in that one container of what we're talking about.
we could go on for days, right? I agree. This is where I'm passionate. Now you've got me that's my passion, right? I do relationship work like you, couples, and interesting enough, I want to tell you something. you won't believe the men stay longer than the women. They usually come back to me and do one-to-ones. And that's very often because, first of all, I don't, and when I'm in therapy with couples, I deal with the man completely the opposite to how I deal with the woman in that process.
A different approach. It has to
And,
be.
and it's their first time, but they've ever got treated in a way that works for them or heard from them inside that process, or they get heard. So, if we go back, if we want to sort of jump on to, how do we get the men supported in all of this? That's that's sort of like getting them more into, working in a therapeutic process, or, it's tougher for the men to come in rather, and the women have an easier way in. To me, there's less men go to therapy. This is basically.
I just feel like my head's going in 10 different directions. I think,
I know. It's an unfair question at this stage.
No, I appreciate the question and I like the question, and I think part of it as well there's so many lenses they look at it with men. I think a lot of men are going through disconnection, like from the self. I don't think it's not to say that we don't have an abundance of great male figures. I think that's an element of it, but I think also there's so much pressure on what it means to be a man, and I think the problem with that is the concept of men. Like, I can't envision ever getting away with saying women are trash, and yet that's all we see online is men are trash, men are this. Everything that's named after a man is somehow bad. And then we think about like how we talk to young boys and how we talk about, generations of men are becoming more radically feminized to the point where we nearly can't recognize classical masculinity in the sense of what it means to be, strong but intelligent, but attuned to your partner, responsible, the head of a household, a leader in the community, to be somebody that is of merit and respect, and to embody that. And then we look at this idea of, men shouldn't talk about things, men shouldn't go and get support, men should figure it out on their own. And that's what I was saying about men holding on men accountable. It's not that you should suffer in silence, and it's not that you shouldn't engage with therapy, but it's that you can let your pride and ego go to the side, come into the space and take responsibility for what is or isn't working, because at some point you have to look at this and go, if what I'm doing is not working, and if I think about this from a place of total honesty with myself, I have a blind spot here that I can't see, and I need somebody to help me navigate this because I don't have a map as they figure this out. And that could be my relationship. There could be something I'm not seeing about this dynamic with my partner, or there could be something very problematic in the way I'm trying to get my needs met. And I think for men, sometimes they'll look at it in a solutions-focused way and they'll be like, well, if I just do this, things will get sorted. And it's not necessarily the thing. There's other stuff at plays, but I think also for men too, it's obviously decades of conditioning. It's the type of men that maybe they grew up with in their family of origin. It's the type of peers that they have around them. And I think it's also how they will see themselves as a result of going into that process. And I think for me personally, therapy has been really transformative. Working in that space has been transformative, but I haven't had the privilege of working with enough men. And I don't write my content on social media in a gendered way.
Yes.
And that's always surprised me, is that people be like, oh, he only works with women. I have never put it out that I only just work with women.
I think you would be fabulous. I would definitely, you are such... the awareness and the understanding of everything from the male perspective and how you view it. I think every man should be heading your way.
Well, it's just the way I feel like I've been able to be of service in that sense has been with women so far, but I think it's also trying to hold a safe, solid space where that kind of healing and change can take place, and it's not to say if it's a male caused the wound that needs to be a male space to work through it, but I think there's an element of safety that can come in where I'm like, look, you're not fucking mad. He was a dickhead. He was abusive. Sometimes you can just name
sometimes you got to call it, to sort of grind it in. It makes sense to people,
Especially where there's been gaslighting and abuse.
And do you know what? Can I just say something? When you say gaslighting and abuse, a lot of times, and I think I want to go back to something, there is some kind of unspoken agreement that's always men doing it.
It's everywhere. And that's the thing about manipulation. People don't like talking about both genders. It's not a gender specific behavior because again, I remember, I'm not going to have this conversation because it'll just go off and on. But I think like the thing about it is that it's when we use that term lightly, we are totally taking away and devaluing the experience of people that have been in those really traumatizing scenarios. And somebody disagreeing with you or misleading you is not in any category the same as being gaslit.
Yes, exactly.
I think people need to realize the severity of that term. Like, this is somebody totally destroying your sense of self and grasp of reality. That's very different from somebody saying, "Oh, I don't remember it that way one time."
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're gaslighting me. It's like, that's not
gaslighting. Exactly. Yeah. So, look, I think we could go on for 10 episodes. Easily, right? So we will come back at some point.
Sure.
I'd love to continue this conversation with you. And because I know we wanted to talk about relationships and complex trauma. So I think, at some point, let us come back and
explore that. For sure.
Because, it's such a great topic, and it needs, it deserves more time than we can give it today. Rory, right? Okay. So I just want to say one thing to you is good luck next week.
For me too, I hope so.
And let me know how it goes. And so let's talk again soon. And thank you for all you've given me in this podcast, everything we've spoken about. And I know, sometimes I hope it's going to be of great value. I know this is going to be of tremendous value for people. So I just want to say thank you.
Stelly, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. You've been listening to the Rebellious Therapist podcast. For more information, you can follow me, the Rebellious Therapist, on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can find further information on my website, therebellioustherapist.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.